Hello, I'm Mandla Lupondwana. Today we're going to spend a few moments talking about pornography. And I hope that the time we are going to spend today is going to be beneficial both to us and to those around us who may be struggling with pornography. Our topic for today is the evil of pornography. And I thought we would start out by looking at two definitions I found online of what pornography is. The first is from the Oxford Online Dictionary, and this is what it says about pornography. Pornography is printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate sexual excitement. So if you are looking at something, it's visual. It may even be digital, but it's visual. It's printed or digital. And what you're seeing or reading about is sexual organs explicitly or sexual activity. And that is designed to arouse you, to excite you sexually. That's pornography. The second definition says, pornography is sexually explicit videos, photographs, writings, or the like, whose purpose is to elicit sexual arousal. So the moment you see a photograph of a sexual organ or people having sex, you see a video of a sexual organ or people having sex, or you read about a sexual organ or people having sex, and what you see and read is explicit and its intention is to arouse you sexually, that is pornography. That's what we're going to be talking about today. The word pornography itself comes from two Greek words. The first one is porne, and it means a buyable woman, someone you can pay money to have sex. And today we call them prostitutes. In some parts of the world, they're called sex workers. And the second part of the word is a Greek word, graphein, which means to write. So from these two words, you get the word pornography. So first of all, pornography has to do with works of art, which is photographs, drawings, paintings, videos, things that you can see, works of art, and even literature, which is books that have been written, novels, short stories about explicit sexual organs or sexual activity. That's what it is. Now, when you combine that material, and which is the explicit stuff, you display it and you write about it, that becomes pornography. So the word pornography was essentially someone writing about harlots, someone writing about prostitutes. Remember, porne is a buyable woman. Now, the earliest forms of pornography that we see, first of all, it's in Asia. In Asia, you see in India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Japan, and China, mainly China initially. That's where we find a lot of resources initially. In fact, China, that's where you even get your first sex manual that we had. So you had these versions of pornography. They came in the form of paintings. They came in the form of drawings. They came also in the form of books, how-to books, manuals. And India became famous also for those. China had novels that explained it. So did Japan. So you'll find that Asia did have pornography as part of their way of life, as part of their culture. They had pornography also because sex played a big part of not just society, but in certain instances, it also played a part in worship. Same thing in Africa. The records that we have, we are able to see that there was pornographic material that was available in Egypt in the form of drawings, in the form of paintings, and sometimes even in the form of sculptures. Same applies with Greece. In Greece, you did not just see the pornography as in between a man and a woman. You also got especially with the Greeks, pornography in the form of paintings and sculptures and drawings of homosexual pornography as well. So you had that, even the point of bestiality, where people were having sex with animals. So you found that in Europe. South America, you also had, particularly in the areas of Peru, you also had long time ago material of a pornographic nature. So the earliest forms of pornography we find in these different parts of the world. Now, Pornographic art was generally available in public, particularly when you got to Europe. It was in the form of sculpture, it was in the form of paintings. So you find that even in the public spaces, you would have sculptures. Even today, if you go to Europe, you'll find these old sculptures of people standing, men standing there with their sexual organs exposed. Same applies with women. There'll be sculptures of women with their sexual organs exposed. So it was just part of the art that people had experienced, particularly when it came to Europe, that was available in the public square. You didn't really have to pay for it. It was just there. It was there for people to just see and appreciate and consume, to an extent that there is a sculpture of a naked woman that is said to have been out in the public, where men would go and masturbate to it. Interesting. Europeans had a very interesting take on pornography. Now, the writings of pornography, those were very, very expensive. And I'm going to explain in a short while why they were expensive. And because they were expensive, only the wealthy could afford to have pornographic writings. The art, the paintings, the drawings, those not so much expensive. In fact, some of those you could find in public spaces. But the writings, those you'd have to pay a hefty amount for. Now, Europe had a concept of, and then to an extent Asia, but it was more codified in Europe. But the culture in Asia also brought the same concept. The concept of a respectable wife. The concept of a respectable wife was that this woman would marry as a virgin, respectable wife. And people who were well off, people who were wealthy, generally went for respectable wives. Someone who married that was going to marry as a virgin. Secondly, they believed that a respectable wife was devoted to motherhood. And her main function outside of motherhood was to manage the household. And she only had sex to have children. So she did not have any sexual interest. So this was the respectable wife that a man would go and marry. They would arrange with families. And to a very large degree, most of these marriages were arranged marriages. So you marry someone because it made financial sense. It made sense for the family. And so you got yourself a respectable wife that allowed you to move in respectable circles in society. On the other hand, particularly the Europeans and the Asians had the prostitute. Now, the prostitute was usually beautiful. She was fun to be with. She was great to talk to. She was always willing to try all kinds of exotic sex. She was always eager to have sex. And it cost money. Now, the interesting thing about it is that because she was beautiful, she would appeal to the senses of the man. So she didn't have to be some respectable person. She was just a beautiful woman and therefore always attractive. Secondly, she was fun to be with. People could afford to go and play and sing and dance with the prostitutes. Why? Because that's what they did. In some societies, this function of the prostitute was performed by a mistress. So a man would have a respectable wife and then have a mistress on the side, and the mistress would do all these things. So that's what the prostitute did. She was the person that these wealthy married men would have fun with, would play with, would have all kinds of enjoyable things. Even when they went on trips sometimes, they would take their prostitute and their mistress and leave the wife behind, because she was a respectable woman who was devoted to being a mother to her children, who was managing the household. And by the way, she would never even be interested in those fun things. That was not their vision of what a respectable wife would do. And with this prostitutes were always interested in having sex. Now, that naturally, because you would pay her, she would be. But that's what they experienced. These men experienced a woman who was interested in having sex, all kinds of exotic sex, and beyond that, this was a woman who was just always eager. Now, understandably, once you pay someone, of course they're going to be eager to earn their money. But for them, it was a woman who was always eager to have sex, any kind of sex, very exciting and interesting things. And so that was their life, but you had to pay for this woman. And depending on what she could offer, she could be more expensive. There were different levels of prostitutes, as there are different levels today. There are those who were very affordable, that anyone could get, who got there for sex. But the higher end prostitutes, those are the ones who were even well traveled. Some of them could read, some of them could write, some of them had read books and novels, some of them had gone to different places. And so the conversation with them was exciting to these guys. And the more exciting the conversation, the more experienced the prostitute was, the more enjoyable the time you'd spend with her. Even outside of having sex with her, the more money you'd pay. So you'd have to pay a lot of money to spend time with a prostitute like this. Now, pornography was then retelling the experiences people had with prostitutes. So you'd sit down and you'd write the experiences you had with prostitute. The interesting thing, particularly about Europe and the Far East Asia to an extent, was that sex with prostitute was not considered adultery. It was not considered cheating. It was not considered inappropriate. It was just something that people did to deal with the issue of lust, and also so that you do not end up burdening your respectable wife and make her something less respectable. And it was the same logic people had for mistresses, to say that I'm going to have a wife, but I'm going to have a mistress to do all these other fun and great things with that I cannot do with my wife. Why? Because my wife is too respectable, too noble to do these kinds of things. So this is what happens. Now, I want you to imagine a situation where you have a concept of a respectable wife and then the concept of a prostitute. And so all of the exciting things that are ever going to happen in your life, most likely are going to happen either with a prostitute or with a mistress, but never really with your wife. And now the person comes along, someone comes along and says, I have a book where I've written about the different experiences I've had with prostitutes. Now that made great reading. And those were the earliest writings of pornography that we find, particularly when we were in Europe. Now, since these initial writings of pornography were expensive, remember, the artwork, the drawings, the paintings, the sculptures, those would end up in public spaces. But the writings themselves that excited people, where people told about their experiences with prostitutes, those were expensive. Why were they expensive? Well, first of all, because the person doing the writing had to be educated. They had to be able to know how to read and how to write. That required a level of education. Secondly, this person must have had money to spend on prostitutes. So the money that they spent on prostitutes meant that they could not be broke. You can't be educated and broke and write pornography. No, you were educated, you had a little bit of money, and you were able to spend it on prostitutes in addition to all of your other expenses in life. And now you would sit down and write, either on a scroll or whatever, and write these experiences. They were exciting, you went into detail so that the person who's reading it can be enthralled by what they are reading. And so they wrote these, and they took time and a lot of effort. So when they were finished with one copy, it would cost a lot of money. And even if you were to get somebody to copy it for somebody else, it would still cost a lot of money. So only the wealthy could afford pornography. The others would settle for the paintings, the drawings, and the sculptures that were out in public spaces. But those who could sit down and read, they would have these parties where someone would come and read out and tell stories about where they have traveled in the world and what experiences they've had with prostitutes. And they would laugh, and it would be a nice way of passing time. It was how the wealthy experienced life. It's how the wealthy got into the world of pornography. But with the passing of time, we saw the introduction of the printing press. With the printing press, it meant that what used to take a long time to do, that is printing, writing a book and then coming up with number of copies, because each copy had to be handwritten, so it would cost a lot of money. The press meant that you could make multiple copies at one go. So you'd pay the guy who wrote the stories and then make multiple copies and sell them to people. So it was much cheaper. So pornography, the printing press meant that you could make more copies. With more copies, the price could drop and you could still make the same amount of money or even more. So the printing press meant that the writings on pornography could be mass produced. It meant that the paintings, the drawings could be mass produced, because now you were able to print a photograph, not a photograph, a painting or a drawing, and then attach it to either different books or publications, and it would go all over the place. And people could afford it because it was not as expensive as the initial originals. Now, with the passing of time, we had the camera. When the camera came along, now it sort of replaced the drawing and the painting, because now the actual human being was there and you were able to take photographs of the actual human being, not just the person, of their sexual organs. You could take photographs of them having sex. And so the camera kind of took over from paintings and drawings, and it became the thing that now was able to produce visuals, photographs of pornography, either sexual organs or sexual activity, with the idea to stimulate sexual excitement or sexual arousal. With the passing of time, we had the video camera. When the video camera came, it revolutionized the whole thing. Remember, with a camera, those photographs ended up in pornographic magazines. So people started publishing in the 20th century. They started publishing magazines that were full of pictures of sexual organs and people having sex, and that was it. That's where the money started coming in. Remember, the printing press had introduced the publication of books, mass production of books and these drawings and paintings. The camera, combine that with the ability to print and mass produce, meant that you could have magazines, thousands, hundreds of thousands of magazines coming off, if not millions, coming off the shelves. People were buying them because they were explicit. And so they became the main source of income for the pornographic industry. So the actors, the women who posed as models, or the men who posed as models or actors when they actually took pictures of people having sex, they got paid, and they got paid well. So the industry started to pick up. With the video camera, they started producing films. And now you had the pornographic magazine, and you also had the video camera. But not many people had the video camera. So you'd have certain theaters that were able to show these pornographic videos. People would pay, they would go, they would watch, and so on. So that became another stream of income. When they started producing a home VCR, in other words, machines where you could play the video cassette, then the pornographic industry was able to move. Instead of going into theaters where people were afraid that someone could see me walk into this, people were able to buy them and take them home, the same way they could buy a magazine and take it home. So that's what the video camera did. But the internet allowed people to view pornography in the privacy of the offices, because when it started out, it was not available in homes. It was huge computers that people could view at work. When the internet came in, we were dealing with personal computers. And then it moved on and went on to laptops. From laptops, people were able to view it privately, but not everyone could have that access to a laptop, that kind of device, and that kind of internet speed. And so these things, pornography was available either in picture format or in video format, or even in the form of stories and novels. They've been available through time. But the internet simply improved its accessibility. Today, people can access it on their phones. They can access it on their tablets. They can access it on all kinds of devices. They can get pictures, they can get videos, they can get stories. And so the full range of pornographic material is now available on the internet. So the internet has allowed people to be able to produce and upload, and also to download and view. So that's what has happened with pornography over the passing of time. Now, let's look at what the pornography has done to the lives of many people. First of all, pornography creates an unrealistic and unhealthy expectation sexually. Now, what do I mean by this? What you see in the pornographic video, or probably even in the photograph, or what you read about in the novel, is usually not the same as what's going to happen in reality. Life and what happens there is not the same. And unfortunately, a number of people, we don't have real statistics for us here in the continent of Africa, but the statistics that we have are statistics that you find from the United States of America. And a lot of kids who end up consuming pornography don't start as adults. They start as children. They start at 8, 9, 10, 11. That's when they start, and they start consuming pornography. And in their mind, their first encounter, their first knowledge of what sex is what they see on the pornographic video. And it's very interesting, because what they see is what they eventually expect is going to happen to them when they get older, and probably when they get married. And so one of the first things they notice is that in a pornographic video or in a pornographic story, you see a woman, you think sex. Because in the videos, people never get turned down. People never get told no. People never get to be told that you're not my type. No, it's like the guy in the video is always the type of the woman in the video, and so it's a theme that's always occurring. And so when this guy sees this woman, he only has one thing in his mind. He doesn't really want to have a conversation with her. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life with her. He just wants to have sex with her. And so you see a woman, you think sex. Now, this has been said to be one of the contributors to the objectification of women. By that I mean this idea that a woman is valuable for sex. You may not be thinking about dirty, funny things, but just that you see a woman and you think, I'd like to have sex with her. And over time, we've even come to describe women as sexy. Why? Sex appeal. That seems to be the one thing that we notice. And it's amazing how over time, we've come to have shoes described as sexy. We've had clothes being described as sexy, hairstyles being described as sexy, sometimes even cars being described as sexy. Why? The whole thing is about sex appeal. So one of the downsides of pornography is that it has contributed to this unhealthy way of seeing women, where you see them and you think sex. You see a woman, you think sex. It would be nice to have sex with her. So when you look at her, the things that jump out at you become the things that are sexually appealing to you. And the second thing that is unhealthy and unrealistic about pornography is that pornography always portrays getting of sex as something very easy. I mean, it's very easy. No one goes into effort in pornography. In fact, you'll find that there is not a lot of time spent. You don't have to get to know the person. You don't even need to be interested in her welfare or well-being. No, sex is just easy. You want, and if you want, she obviously wants. And that's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate correlation, because if you are going to think that when I want, she wants, she may be a complete stranger. You look at her, you find her attractive, you find her sexually appealing, sexy. You are desirous of having sex with her. Then what you see in the pornographic movies is that the moment you want to have sex, she also wants to have sex. The only problem you have is when and where you're going to have sex. But you wanting to have sex generally means that she also wants to have sex. That is, when brought into real life, sometimes manifests itself in men who don't understand why it is that when they're greeting a woman, she's not excited to greet back. And they can be offended and be upset by the fact that, hey, I'm greeting you, why aren't you answering? The fact that when you are flirting with a woman, she should be flirting back. What's wrong with her? Because if she's not flirting back, then there must be something wrong with her. That if you have an interest in a woman and you touch her shoulder, you touch her waist, you touch her bum, you touch her legs, then somehow she should respond with excitement, because that's what would happen in the pornographic story or video. And when she doesn't do that, then there's something obviously wrong with her. And so you'll find that this ease of getting sex, this sense that whenever you want to have sex, you have a woman who's ready to reciprocate, and it will always naturally happen, has meant that people have, especially guys, we've approached girls with the expectation that we are going to get the same response the guys in the videos get, the guys in the stories get. And that's not always the case. And the interesting thing about it is the disappointment that comes when you realize that these women aren't responding the way they are supposed to respond. You know how they're supposed to respond because you saw it in the video, you read about it in the book, and now they're not responding. It has messed up men's self-esteem, where they decide that maybe there's something wrong with them, maybe they're not desirable, and then they try and find other ways to have sex. Because being turned down by a woman is natural. I mean, just because you like her doesn't mean she likes you. Just because you want to have sex with her doesn't mean she wants to have sex with you. Even when she may want to have sex with you, her values and spirituality may say that sex is not going to be available now. You're going to have to wait until we get married for that. But it has sometimes messed up our self-esteem as men, that sometimes we find other ways of having sex. These other ways of having sex have sometimes included us date rape, where we use drugs to drug the women and we have sex with them. Sometimes we rape them. Sometimes we try and coerce them. We put them in situations where they're kind of forced to have sex with us. I remember reading about this guy who was mentioning on social media that he went out with this girl, and then he brought her over to his place. And she was not interested in having sex. You know, that was not what she was there for. She thought they were just starting out a relationship. Now, very interesting thing he says that he then told her to leave. It was in the middle of the night, and he says he knew that it was dark outside and she would probably be scared. And so he simply told her that if you're not going to have sex with me, then you might as well leave. But she, fearing for her life if she had to leave, she agreed to have sex with her. Now that's coercion. And those are things that people do because they expected a particular response. It's wrong. It's wrong to do that. So we've done all kinds of things to coerce women, to put them in situations where they are pressurized, and sometimes gone to the extent of violating them and raping them one way or the other. Why? Because sometimes our self-esteem has been messed up. Because we approached a woman and the response we got was not the same response that was there in the movie. It has done that. Now, sometimes when you watch the movies and you see the photographs and you read about in the stories will always describe a man with serious sexual organs that are very big. Sometimes the photographs depict it. It's interesting that in the pornographic industry, men have been encouraged to embark in penis enlargement procedures, whether they work or not, but they have. And sometimes those procedures affect the functioning of the penis for normal sex. But for business, it's good because it looks big. And sometimes girls who started out, interestingly, in the United States, about 30% of the people who consume pornography are women. And those who start out watching pornography kind of expect that the man is going to have a big sexual organ. And in reality, when they get to see it, they wonder, is this it? Is there all there is to it? I mean, where's the rest of it? Because they kind of expected what they saw in the photograph or in the video would be reality, and in reality it's not always the case. And on top of that, in the pornographic videos and in the stories that are told, sex is always great. It's always great in the sense that there's always great foreplay, there's always sex itself, and both of you always enjoy sex, and it always takes forever. And the reason why that's the case is because one sex scene shot for a movie can sometimes, we'll do this part, then the director will say cut, and then they change positions. So okay, fine, you do this, sit here like that, ready, action, and then it continues. And you do this like cut, 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 and then cut again, and you change like this. And so they do the cut and paste, they go for lunch, they come back, they continue, they go in the evening, they go home, they come back tomorrow. And sometimes it could take 2 to 3 days just to perfect one scene. And when that scene is perfected, then it comes on video. But when you see it as one long, smooth, great thing that has happened. And sometimes women have expected that the men are going to be as professional, they're going to be doing such a great job as the guy in the movie, not realizing that the guy in the movie, first of all, was paid to do it. Secondly, did it over a long period of time. And thirdly, had a coach standing there saying, yes, yes, like, stop, do that again, cut, retake. And then they continue. So because they don't realize that's the case, it's choreographed. That's what they expect. And the real sex is hardly ever anything close to what they saw on television. And so they are able to be dissatisfied with what they see. The sex in the pornography is always great, always amazing for both parties. And people who've consumed pornography have tended to be dissatisfied with sex in real life. Why? Because it doesn't come close to what they saw in the movie. And the interesting thing about it is, in the sex that they see in the movie, the women are always eager. There is never a time when they have a headache, never a time when they're not in the mood, never a time when they are stressed, never a time when they are too tired. It doesn't matter what they were doing. Whenever it's like sex, they drop whatever they are doing and they come over to sex with all the excitement and enthusiasm in the world. Reality, people get married and discover that's not really the case. So these unhealthy and unrealistic expectations that we get from pornography usually mess up real life relationships. And this is why sometimes when people feel that they've left pornography, now they've settled down, they have this wife or husband of theirs, still there's an element of dissatisfaction because you have a sense that this could be better. How do you know it could be better? You saw a choreographed, directed scene in a movie, or you read someone's novel, and in the novel they go into detail talking about things that never happened. I mean, novel is fiction. It's designed to excite you. It's not designed to be realistic. And so it leaves people dissatisfied because they are not getting what they think they should be getting based on their previous experience with pornography. Now, pornography is addictive. It's addictive, and like all other addictive things, when you start out, whatever you need in order to get excited, next time you'll need more. So someone who started out by looking at a picture of a woman's breasts is going to be excited by that, but over time, that's not going to be enough. They're going to need to see the woman's sexual organs. And that may excite them for a while, and after a while, they need more. They need to see people actually having sex. And it keeps on growing from there, And the interesting thing is this: the excitement that we get, when we have sex is what brings us back, is what constantly brings us back. So it's not just that you're looking at a photograph, or you're looking at watching a movie or reading a story. It's just that it's able to mess up your neural pathways such that you need to keep on coming back. There are people who get married and afterwards are unable to have a natural erection. Why? Because the wife in front of them is not as exciting as pornography. So sometimes they need to watch a little bit of pornography for them to be able to be excited. Then they can have sex with their spouse. That's an addiction. For you to need to have pornography in order to function sexually, that's an addiction. And people who are addicted, people who are into pornography and who are into the sexual high and the excitement that comes with watching pornography or reading about pornography or just looking at it, over time, they lose interest in the healthy family relations. And usually, the spouse is able to tell that something has changed between us. Why? Because your interest is no longer here. Your interest is elsewhere. Today, it may be on the phone. Before the phones, we had these capacities. It was in a computer somewhere in a room or in a basement. Before that happened, it was because someone had a video recorder and cassettes stashed somewhere that he could go and watch privately when the other people were not there. Before that came in, it was the pornographic magazine that people were able to watch. So the interest in normal family relations is not there. And the interesting thing about it is that pornography never, the ease of getting women and their eagerness to have sex means that when we watch pornography, we never learn to invest in the relationship. We never learn to invest in pursuing each other in the marriage, to make each other feel appreciated, make each other feel wanted, to make each other feel that they're attractive to the other person. We never get to develop those skills. And now here we are in a setup where you should be having sex because God created sex for us to enjoy it and to have it. But here you are, you find yourself in a situation where you should be having sex and it's not quite happening. Why? Because there's some unhealthy view of sex you got from pornography and it's not syncing with what's happening in reality. And so the normal human relationships that happen between a husband and a wife end up suffering. Why? Because pornography has placed something in the back of your mind that produces a sexual high and a sexual excitement that your spouse is unable to produce. And remember, because pornography is there always either in the magazine or in the book or on your phone or on your laptop, do you know what? Every time you want it, it's there. But in reality, no husband is there every time you want to have sex with him. No wife is there every time you want to have sex with her. It's just not normal. It doesn't happen in reality. But pornography is ever ready. So no one in reality can ever compare with one, the availability of pornography, to the fact that pornography is always willing to excite you. No one is ever going to be able to compete with that. And that's how the relationships get to suffer when pornography comes into the picture. And unfortunately, pornography contributes to human trafficking. Why? Because some people don't just want to see it in a magazine, a photograph in a magazine. They don't just want to watch a video. They don't just want to read a novel about it. Some people want to see it live. Some people want to see you have sex in live with somebody else and they watch. And for those live shows, you pay more money. And it's cheaper for the industry if they're able to pay women to come and do it. Sometimes they're not willing to do it, so they drug them. So human traffickers, there are some human traffickers who buy and sell women and girls for sex, either for prostitution or for people to be able to watch them have that sex. And there are certain forms of pornography that include a lot of pain. Some people want to watch someone being beaten up. They want to watch someone being raped. They want to watch someone bleeding because they've been kicked and beaten before they submit to sex. It's a form of rape. It's a form of pornography. They're excited by the rape and all of that stuff. And some people want and there are illegal forms of pornography as well, where some actually want to see someone being raped and killed in the process. So human trafficking gets to be benefit from the market, benefit from the interest that started out with someone watching a video, looking at a photograph, reading a novel. It can get to that state. Now, not everybody who consumes pornography gets addicted to pornography. Not everybody who consumes pornography eventually gets to want to see the extreme versions of pornography. But you do have these people who have these sick and extreme versions of what they want in pornography, and they pay for it. That's the downside of it. So some people have been trafficked for pornography. Child sex offenders are those children who are probably between the ages of 6 or about 17, who themselves end up committing sexual offenses against other children. Now, these are children who will either share pornography with other children, or you'll find that they're fondling other children at school in a way that is very sexual. They're touching their sexual parts. Sometimes they're involved in date rape, where they put things, drugs in other children's drinks or foods in order to rape them when they're out with them on a date. Sometimes they get involved in gang rape. So all of these things that these children can do, even though they're not adults yet, we have found that a number of these child sex offenders, or in some places they're called juvenile sex offenders, that they had started out consuming pornography, that they themselves started out by watching pornography, viewing pornography, reading about reading what was in pornographic novels and so on. And so some desire in them to have sex was awakened at a very early age. And now they're trying to get what they saw, they're trying to get what they read about in real life, and they're doing it with other children. And it's true that some of them have ended up serving time in juvenile centers. Others have even, depending on which country they are in, have even been charged with offenses and charged as adults and end up serving with adults, all because there was an early introduction of pornography in their lives. And so this effect it has on children is not just that it's not just that it will open their eyes to sex, because some people feel that it's a good way of teaching children about sex. You show them a magazine here, you show them a movie there, at least they must have an idea of what's going to happen when they grow old and they need to have sex. The problem is sometimes the use of pornography or the exposure of children to pornography can make them child sex offenders. So a child can start out life with this record, knowing that I have done this, even though it may be something that is juvenile, that may not reflect against them when they become adults, but they know that this is what they went through. And sometimes when they go to the centers, they or these facilities, they're able to learn about other crimes. And so instead of coming out having been fully rehabilitated because they came in as a child sex offender, sometimes they come out having graduated in other ways of thinking and viewing sex. Some of them get violated when they are in those facilities. Some of them get molested, they get raped in those facilities. So they come out worse than they went in. And that's part of the evils of pornography that we don't always think about when children get exposed to pornography. These people who like to have sex with children, now that is not sex, that is statutory rape. It is child sexual abuse. But there are people who are excited by it. And there are people who produce and collect and distribute child pornography. And you'll find that they never started with child pornography. Hardly ever started with child pornography. They started with regular pornography, and then they moved and their interests migrated to children. And so a lot of children then get to be abused. Some get abducted by people who are producing child pornography, and those kids get to suffer. These are some of the evils of pornography. So pornography is not just for adults, whether it's consensual or those who've been trafficked. Pornography has come to also include child pornography. In most countries that I know of, I don't know of a country where it's not. Child pornography is illegal. But the fact that it's illegal has not stopped people from doing it, because there is a desire that pornography awakens, and that desire is hard to quench, if it is ever quenchable. You need some form of release from that desire that kind of takes over your sexual desires. And lastly, pornography has the unfortunate result of messing up with our spirituality. It destroys our spirituality because, first of all, we know that we shouldn't be observing pornography. Jesus says whoever looks at a woman and lusts after her has already committed adultery in his heart. So it's not just what you do, it's also what's in your mind, what's in your heart. So we know we shouldn't be doing it. We know that sex belongs in the context of marriage. That's where God created it. God created and placed sex in the context of marriage. And so we know that there's something that's not right about pornography. Even though society may go around talking about the benefits of pornography, that you can have it in the privacy of your own room and so on, we know spiritually we should not be doing it. But because of the strong hold, the strong hook that pornography has on our lives, we find ourselves consuming it on our phones, on our laptops. We find ourselves with resources stashed somewhere where we go back to pornography. And because God created sex to be powerful and exciting and pleasurable, pornography gets to use that which God created and made amazing and made powerful and made great, uses that desire, that feeling to make you want to come back for more. And what happens is this: because we know it's wrong, we tend to feel guilty. As we feel guilty, we come to the Lord, we ask for forgiveness, and then we find ourselves going back. And then at some point, some people just give up. They say, well, maybe this is too much for me. And they keep it as a private secret from everybody else as they try and do this. Now, One of the things that suffer, when we know that there is a known sin in our lives, a resident sin that's not going anywhere, is that the first thing that suffers is our relationship with God. Our desire to read the Bible and our desire to pray. Even when we pray, we end up with these mechanical prayers where we are just doing it to make sure, well, we've prayed. But there's this thing in our hearts that messes up our relationship with the Lord. And so we struggle with it, and we struggle with it in silence. And that struggle in silence is a struggle of millions of people all over the world, millions of Christians all over the world, all over the world. I read an article once about the prevalence of the pornography addiction amongst ministers in North America. Now, I'm sure it's not confined to ministers in North America. It's just that they were able to do the study there. In other places, I suppose we don't really have reliable statistics, particularly on the continent of Africa, of the prevalence of pornographic addiction amongst Christians, amongst leaders of churches, and even amongst pastors. We don't have it, but it's there. It's a struggle that human beings have, and it messes up with our spirituality. It messes up with our relationship with the Lord. As a result, we end up sticking to the things we know people can see, and think that because they see us do these things, that somehow we have a connection with the Lord. We end up ticking a box. You know, I've gone to church, I have done the singing, I have preached, I have served in that position, I have done this, I've sat in that committee, I've explained that text. And the fact that you know the Bible does not necessarily mean that you're spiritual. Because spirituality is about your connection with God and the life you live because of that connection. But what pornography does, and any sin that we have in our lives, is that it messes up that relationship with the Lord, so that the life we live does not flow from our connection to God. The life we live flows from a set of things we know that if we do these things, then we know that we're going to look good, we're going to look like we are Christians. And deep down we know there's something terribly wrong that is happening in our lives. This is the evil of pornography. It doesn't just affect your relationship with your spouse when you get married. It doesn't just end there. It moves on. It can create in us appetites that are dangerous for other people's lives and well-being. This is when trafficking comes in. It can even pose a danger to children, because some of these appetites can move from adults to children, becoming a danger to the well-being and the lively and the life of children. And beyond that, pornography has the capacity to mess up our relationship with God and destroy our spirituality. Is there hope? Yes, there is hope. First, we need to admit that we have a problem. If you're going to hide that you have a problem, not admit that you have a problem, it's not going to work. And it starts by you admitting to yourself that I have a problem. You come to the Lord and admit to him that you have a problem. And you probably need to approach somebody as well and tell a close person, someone you can trust, that look, I have a problem with pornography. So the first step is admitting I have a problem with pornography. But generally, that's not our approach. When it comes to pornography, we tend to feel it's just curiosity. I just use it sometimes. I don't use it all the time. I mean, it's just when I'm bored, when I have time. We kind of find ways of downplaying its impact in our lives. But if you want to have any form of release from the problem of pornography, it starts with admitting that I have a problem. And that problem is pornography. Secondly, the mind, whenever you watch pornography, the mind produces this feel-good feeling that comes from dopamine. It's secreted every time we have something that excites us, that makes us feel good. And what you get from sex is the same thing we get from laughing, from going to a comedy show. It makes us feel good. This feel-good feeling is the reason why we go back. And partly the reason why we don't want to stop is because it feels great. And the interesting thing about all sins is that generally they feel good. If they didn't feel good, we would not do them. They feel good because generally the sins that are there in our lives that mess us up are built. Their foundation is something good that God created. And he created it to have its own benefits. And so that's what sin does. It simply messes up how we do it, when we do it. It changes the way God said this is how it should be done. But eventually you get the same results that God had intended. God had intended that sex should be great. He had intended for us to want to have sex, to have it, and the more we have it, the more we want more of it. It was designed that way from the very onset. What pornography does, it gives you sex that you can watch but not have, which means that you'll always want but hardly ever get the release. And the kind of desire that you want is a desire that may not even be fulfilled by another human being. And so it makes you come back to pornography because it's able to give you a particular high. So that feeling, that great feeling, is what makes us keep on going back. Now, once you admit you have a problem and you understand that this is not something you can just only pray away. Because sometimes we think as Christians that if I pray about it, it's going to go away. It's not. It's not just a question of spirituality. This is a problem that also has to deal with you physically. It has to do with mental health. You may even need some form of counseling. And so you need to go and seek a professional for help. Now, there's something wrong with it. Nothing wrong with seeking a professional help because you have a problem with pornography. Why? Because if you had a problem with your tooth, you'd go to a professional, a dentist, to help you with your tooth. If you had a problem with your arm that was broken or something like that, you'd go to a doctor because the doctor's the professional. We tend to go to professionals for all kinds of things. I mean, we go to professionals to do our hair. We do for hair. We go to professionals. If we want to have our pants that we just bought, if it's too long and you want someone to shorten it, you go to a professional. You find a tailor. You take it to the tailor. Something wrong with your phone, you take it to a professional. We do it about almost everything in our lives but our own mental health. When we have a problem with pornography, the third thing is to admit, to then seek out professional help. Admit that you have a problem. Accept that it's not just a problem that is spiritual that you can pray about and move on. You're going to need to have some professional help, someone who can provide you with counseling. And you may say, but where am I going to find someone who can provide me with counseling? In today's world, you can Google it. If you have that kind of relationship with your minister or your pastor where you can be open and honest with them about certain things, then you can ask him where you can find help. Because remember, not all ministers, not all pastors are equipped to help to deal with problems like pornography or any other addiction. But we may be able to refer you to someone who's going to be able to do it. And the fact that you go to a professional does not mean you don't trust God. Why? Because I've gone to visit our members in prison, in hospital. And they were there in hospital for all kinds of illnesses. They went to the doctor not because they didn't trust God, but because they prayed to God, went to the doctor to do the professional. There are certain things God is not going to do for us. He may bless you with the ability to make money, but he's not going to cook the food for you. You're going to have to go into the kitchen. You're going to have to cook the food yourself. And after you've cooked it, the Lord is not going to put it on your plate. He's not going to feed you. You have to do those things yourself. So there are certain things the Lord has set for us to do and be able to approach professionals to do it. This is why we take our cars for service. We don't pray and hope that the car is going to be fine. When my tire is flat, I don't pray and when I open my eyes, the tire has been changed. I have to do that myself. So going to a professional does not mean you don't trust God, does not mean you don't believe in God. It simply means, like all these other things in life that require a professional, this is one of those things that require a professional. And lastly, when you come to the Lord, open up to him. Don't hide stuff from the Lord as if he was not there watching you watch it. As if there was a time when you were under the blankets or you turned off the light where God did not see. He already saw it. Now you may ask, but why do I have to tell him? Because if you're going to be open and honest with the Lord and maintain your relationship with him, it starts with you opening up to him and saying, this is what I did. He knows you did it. You know he knows he did it. Then say it. And it's amazing that when you do that, when you're able to open up to the Lord and confess your sins and repent, the Bible says when we confess our sins, he is faithful and true to forgive us of all our sins and to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. That's what God is going to do. He is faithful and he will forgive us of our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. So open up to the Lord in prayer and say, Lord, I am struggling with pornography. Do it in the privacy of your own room, privacy of whatever space that you may have. I am struggling with pornography. It feels great. I enjoy it, but I know I shouldn't be doing it. I feel guilty after I do it. Help me, Lord. Ask him to forgive you for what you've done and ask him to help you. And the Lord will help you. He will use whatever professional that you're working with for you to be able to find the root cause of why you're having this problem, why you have this attraction to pornography, and help you out of it. He's able to. He's able to. Our text that I'd like us to end off is in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. It reads as follows: no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. The challenge of pornography is not a challenge that is unusual to mankind, that is uncommon to mankind. It is very common to mankind. And God will not allow us to be tempted by pornography if he believes that we are unable to deal and overcome the temptation of pornography. When we are tempted by pornography, God does not only give us the power to overcome it, he will also make a way out for you. And if you think you did not have a way out, today I'm saying, admit that you have a problem. Understand that the problem is not something that you can just pray away, that you're going to need professional help. Seek the professional help and open up to the Lord and say, Lord, I have sinned. Forgive me. I have a problem with pornography. Help me. And the Lord God Almighty will help you. If you are struggling with pornography, don't struggle in silence. Don't let it destroy your life or destroy your relationships or you destroy your relationship with God. Don't let it mess up who you think you are and your sense of what you can achieve. No, don't let pornography destroy your life. There is hope. It doesn't need to end with you being defeated by pornography. Pornography may be evil, but the love of God, the grace of God is greater than anything pornography can do in your life. God bless you.